Putin just did the unthinkable. He has admitted that Ukraine is breaking Russia. That admission was delivered in the typical Putin manner. He wouldn't go so far as to say that the war was lost, but the fact that he is acknowledging Ukraine like this at all tells us what Putin is really thinking. He knows that Ukraine is winning. Putin knows that Russia can't turn the tide. And what we now see in his words is a desperate attempt to regain control of a narrative that long ago slipped through his fingers as Putin panics about his own future. As Ukraine steps up its long-range campaign against Russia, Putin has been forced to admit something that nobody ever thought would come out of his mouth. Russia has a fuel crisis, and it's all due to Ukraine's strikes. Of course, Putin couldn't bring himself to outright say it, and he used his admission as a strange sort of call to arms to Russia's people that they should continue to suffer for his war. Naturally, we are adjusting certain plans in light of the current situation, but all strategically important domestic development programs will undoubtedly be implemented in full, Putin said on June 28th, as he tried to convince the Russian people that empty pumps at gas stations wouldn't stop Russia from building houses, creating roads, and offering jobs and support to Russia's people. But even as he tried to sugarcoat the message, Putin had to admit that his war has brought pain to his people. We are going through a difficult period, but this has taught us a great deal and allowed us to grasp the very essence of what it means to be a Russian citizen, Putin said. What does it mean to be a Russian citizen, Putin? Because right now, it seems to mean living in a country where you've tanked the economy and made every piece of the oil infrastructure that keeps Russia alive a target for Ukraine. It's a sad statement from a man who knows that his invasion has failed and his people are getting increasingly angry that the war he claimed would be over in days has now lasted so long that it's actively hurting them. But the craziest thing is that this is just the latest of Putin's admissions. Just 16 days before, Putin and the Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov met with Russian soldiers to discuss the state of the war. We also saw something similar in that meeting to Putin's latest comments. Russia's leader tried to place the focus on new social measures that the Kremlin has introduced, but he also snuck in an acknowledgement that Ukraine's drone strikes can't be ignored. They are an attempt to sow discord, Putin claimed. Russia's leader also said that advances on the ground aren't going as quickly as Russia likes, which is yet another confession that the Russian strategy is failing. Putin can't come up with the answers needed to stop a Ukrainian victory. Putin likely chose to acknowledge some of the setbacks Russian forces have faced in order to appear more aware of battlefield realities in the eyes of the Russian servicemen who have directly experienced these failures, the Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, said of these remarks. And the ISW has a point. Putin is trying to control the narrative around his war once again, and the way that he is attempting that is to try to relate to the Russian people while acting like he is more aware of the horrors that he has unleashed on the country's military than he really is. This is desperation writ large for Putin. Though not an outright confession of defeat, these remarks are much different from Putin's usual modus operandi. Let's go back to April. That month saw Putin acknowledge another problem that Russia faces, only his tone was much different. This time it was the Russian economy and its many failings that Putin was forced to face, and he did indeed point out there had been declines in business and investment activity in Russia. But he didn't offer any hint of a suggestion that his own failures were the reason why, and he also didn't try to distract anybody listening with talk of social programs that Russia will inevitably fail to deliver. Instead, Putin made demands while shifting blame. Russia's president told his country's top financial minds that they needed to find solutions to Russia's many economic problems, outright ignoring the fact that he is the root cause of those issues. That's Putin's usual approach. If he acknowledges any failing at all, it's never his fault, and it's always up to somebody else to fix the problem. But this latest admission is different. We get the acknowledgement of the problems, but rather than shifting blame and acting like he has nothing to do with it, Putin is trying to directly convince his people that he is working on solutions. All as he tells them that surviving all of this will mean that they are true Russians. It's base manipulation, and it's far more revealing than Putin wants it to seem. He's telling his people that Russia is losing the war. And really, he's just saying what those people already know. What we see from all of this is that Putin is panicking. Even his guarded admission is franker than he usually is, and it's all coming at a time when even a man who likes to keep his head buried in the sand can see that the mood in Russia is turning against him. Don't get us wrong, Putin will still make grand declarations. On the same day when he admitted that Ukraine's drones are causing mass fuel shortages, Putin still said that Russia will press on with its frontline campaign. None of this is a sign that Putin is going to end his war. His confession runs much deeper than that, and it shows that Putin finally recognizes that power is slipping out of his hands. Let's dig a little more. Putin's acknowledgement of Ukraine's drones and the fuel issues that they have caused hasn't come out of nowhere. About a week before, Ukraine attacked Moscow's main oil refinery, causing massive black clouds to cover the skies. That refinery supplies about 40% of Moscow's gasoline needs, along with 50% of its diesel, Pravda reports, and it's been attacked twice in June. It isn't coming back online anytime soon. It will take at least half a year to repair, one unnamed source told Pravda, and that's something that Putin simply can't hide. The shortages at the pumps that will result, along with the visual evidence of the explosions and the blackened skies in the aftermath, are all evidence that Muscovites can see with their own eyes. Failure to acknowledge them would have been a clear message to those in Moscow that Putin is so disconnected from the impact that his war has that he even ignores what is happening in Russia's most important city. Putin couldn't allow that perception to spread because he has plenty more problems when it comes to convincing the people that he has effectively ruled over since 2000 that he is still the man for the job. In the days before Putin made his little confession, he'd received a hammer blow from his own people. His ratings had slipped to a wartime low, and it was all because of the impact that Ukraine's strikes are having on everyday Russians. In a June 27th report, the New Voice of Ukraine revealed that the pro-Kremlin Russian Public Opinion Foundation, or FOM, had delivered polling data gathered between June 19th and June 21st. That data revealed that the number of people who rather trust Putin had dropped 5 percentage points, from 74% to 69%. That's still a relatively high number, but consider the source. This is a pro-Kremlin pollster, recording a marked decline in public opinion of Putin. More worrying for Russia's leader is that those who said they rather do not trust him had risen to 18%, which is a record since the invasion began. But perhaps the truest demonstration of the people's opinion of Putin comes from the polling related to the performance of the Russian government. Only 44% of respondents said that Putin's cronies are doing a good job, which is down from the 48% it was previously, and 34% expressed dissatisfaction, which is another wartime peak. Putin knows what this means. The nebulous government is much safer to criticize than Putin himself, which is why we're seeing more honest opinions there. Russians know that what the Kremlin does is really all at the behest of Putin, and Russia's president isn't ignorant of that fact. If his own approval ratings show that more Russians are becoming brave enough to criticize him by name, the government figures demonstrate what they really feel about him when they don't feel they're taking a risk by showcasing their displeasure. Bear in mind that the Kremlin typically censors polling data, as it did for results gathered by the Russian Public Opinion Research Center when they started to show a marked decline in support for Putin, which coincided with Putin's internal support figure dropping below 30%, the New Voice of Ukraine reports. What we see here is the real reason why Putin is being so much more open than he has ever been about the issues that Ukraine is causing Russia. But it goes even deeper than that. This openness also comes on the back of failures to control the narrative and a complete shift of mood inside Russia that even somebody as purposefully ignorant as Putin can't ignore. Before we explain more, this is a reminder that you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to hit that button. Beyond the polling results and the evidence that is right in front of the Russian people's eyes, Putin is dealing with other issues. His attempts to hide everything aren't working. For much of 2026, the Kremlin has been cracking down on internet access, including placing restrictions on the use of WhatsApp and Telegram. There have also been regular shutdowns of mobile internet services, often happening at right around the time that Ukraine launches drone attacks. The Kremlin tries to claim that this is to prevent interference with air defense systems, but it seems far more likely that these crackdowns are supposed to stop people from sharing photographs and footage of Ukraine's successful attacks. Whatever the reason for the net crackdowns, it isn't working. Footage still gets out, and according to the Jamestown Foundation, Putin's anti-internet moves are contributing to his low approval ratings due to affecting everybody from the average Russian trying to access internet banking to the soldier on the front who can no longer use Telegram to communicate with their comrades. The failure of this attempt to control the narrative is also being accompanied by an exodus of the children of Russian officials out of Moscow. That's according to the New Voice of Ukraine, which reported that many who work in the system that Putin has created believe that this system has no future due to what's happening in Ukraine. One anonymous source said that he and his colleagues have no future if Putin's reign collapses, which is why he has sent his child abroad to study. Better to get out of a dying country now than be there for the chaos that follows Putin's downfall. The mood is changing inside Russia, and not even Putin can ignore it anymore. People who were once loyalists are complaining about the Kremlin's increasingly draconian policies. Any semblance of patriotism or optimism about the future of Russia has been completely sapped out of the country. Restrictions and repression mount as an inevitable recession bites down hard on the people who have already been forced to sacrifice so much, often in the blood of their family members, all to sustain Putin's war. Those who had adjusted to the idea of the Ukraine war following the initial failure of the so-called special military operation are now wallowing in the depths of the gloom that encapsulates so much of Russia. Putin is being forced to accept the fact that he doesn't control the narrative anymore. Everybody, from his people to some of his pro-Kremlin sources and officials, are turning against him. Ukraine, of course, has played a massive role in all of this, a regime that has spent years both justifying the war and trying to convince its people that they would never feel the ill effects of the fight as being caught with its pants down, and Putin is the most naked of them all. Well over 1 million casualties, drones in the skies, fires in the refineries, and shortages at the gas pumps are all evidence that the narrative of the mighty Russia and puny Ukraine is false. Russia's people are waking up to it, and even Putin sees that happening. That's what his admission was really all about. When Putin openly talks about fuel shortages, drone attacks, and failures on the front lines, he's making a desperate last-gasp attempt to retake control over the narrative. Putin wants to look relatable. He wants everyday Russians to believe that he sees their problems and, more importantly, that he cares about them. That's why we see all of the talk about roads being built and social programs being implemented mixed in with Putin's confessions about Ukraine. He's trying to turn the tide of public sentiment, which is turning against him just like the tide of the war that he started. And the fact that Putin, the so-called strongman of Russia who never shows weakness to anybody, has been reduced to this point is more of an admission than any of the words that come out of his mouth. Russia's leader knows that the war is lost, and finally, there's some truth coming out of his mouth. Let's look at those fuel issues that Putin mentioned. Those aren't going away anytime soon, and Putin knows that just as well as he knows that the Russian public is getting angry with him. Ukraine has created a brilliant long and middle-range strike campaign that is choking off fuel supplies all across Russia and the occupied territories. In a June 24th report, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty revealed that at least 17 Russian regions have imposed mandatory restrictions on gasoline and diesel sales, while many more have reported shortages. All told, 55 of Russia's 83 federal entities, which include oblasts, republics, and various other types of regions, are reporting fuel-related issues. Ukraine keeps on making it all worse. On the same day that Putin admitted to the fuel issues, Al Jazeera reported that Ukraine has carried out strikes in the Slovyansk and Yaroslavl refineries, which are 300 and 700 kilometers away from Ukraine, respectively. Massive fires have broken out, which is becoming a regular sight for Russia's people these days. Those fires will only make Russia's fuel problems worse, but there's one region that is feeling the pain more than any other: Crimea. The biggest symbol of Russia's supposed power over Ukraine is crumbling under a brilliant isolation campaign that is cutting the peninsula off from the Russian mainland and the occupied territories. As other Russian regions report shortages, this illegally annexed territory has practically run out of fuel for all but the Russian military and emergency services. Civilians, for the most part, are out of luck if they head to the pumps expecting to get any fuel. What was supposed to be a fortress for Russia has become an outright liability, both strategically as Ukraine minimizes any impact that Crimea can have on Putin's campaign inside Russia, and politically in terms of Crimea showcasing the true weakness of Russia's leader. Oh, and don't forget Putin's admission that things aren't going as well on the ground as Russia would like. That's an understatement. Critical threat reports that the best that Russia can hope for from this spring and summer offensive that was supposed to claim the Donbass region is some minor tactical gains in Konstantinivka. There will be no real operational gains against the fortress belt during the summer months, meaning Russia will have utterly failed to even come close to claiming a region that Putin demanded should fall by September. And this failure is compounded by Russia losing territory elsewhere, to the point that April and May saw Ukraine make net gains, per the ISW. This is what we mean when we say Putin's statements are an admission that the war is lost. Ukraine has all of the momentum on the battlefield. Putin is running out of steam at home. Putin hopes that acknowledging the problems will be enough to convince his people that he's doing something about them, when the reality is that he can't stop any of this. And wouldn't you just know it, peace talks are sparking up as Putin faces all of this, and that's something else that Russia's leader has acknowledged. AA reports that Putin has revealed that Russia has received a new proposal that would lead to both sides halting their long-range strikes while confining military operations to the Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions. It's not peace, but it's a message from Ukraine that it's willing to allow Putin to back down with some sort of dignity, perhaps paving the way for a withdrawal. Putin isn't going to accept these proposals. He knows that he can't because doing so would be yet another admission of his utter failure to do what he said he was going to do in Ukraine. And it's likely that Ukraine also knows that Putin is going to say no. It's just giving him the chance before it intensifies all of the strikes that have caused Putin to become so forthright in the first place. Of course, Putin will still try to project power. He's already made a big song and dance about how he'll reject these latest Ukrainian proposals as he tries to shift the narrative once more. But it's all fake. It always has been, only now it's clearer than ever to Russians dealing with a fuel crisis and watching as key facilities in their cities burn. But his words reveal more than he intends. The attempt to be relatable and to convince his people that he is on top of the issues that his war has created is really Putin's confession. He is losing the Ukraine war. Putin is broken, as are his illusions, and all that's left is the continued deterioration of Russia until, finally, the already changing mood turns into a backlash so strong that Putin won't be able to survive. And as he tries to hide away from the fact of his own failure, Putin knows that the drones that sparked his confession will keep on coming. What we've seen so far in 2026 has been a drone storm so vast that it has blacked out the sun in Russia and the occupied territories. 800,000 targets and counting have been hit, and you can find out why that matters and what comes next if you watch our video. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you subscribe to The Military Show so you don't miss what we have coming next as we continue our reporting on the Ukraine war. And thank you as always for watching.